thought I had married the only man who would ever truly love me. For 3 years, Damien Blackwood treated me like I was the center of his world, until I opened a hidden box in his private office. Inside were old photographs, love letters, and the face of a man who looked exactly like me. That was the night I realized my marriage had been built on a terrifying lie. I packed a single bag and ran before my husband came home. But I had no idea you can't disappear from a man who has been hunting you long before you ever met. When my motel room door exploded off its hinges just hours later, I realized I had never been running away. I had been running straight back into his cage. Ethan Brooks had spent most of his life believing love wasn't meant for someone like him. He wasn't the strongest omega, the most beautiful, or the most desired. He owned a small family bakery in the historic streets of Boston, Massachusetts, where his mornings began before sunrise, covered in flour instead of luxury. His scent, soft vanilla mixed with warm honey, was so faint that most dominant alphas barely noticed it. By 26, he'd accepted that his future would probably be lonely. Then Damien Blackwood walked into his life. Damien wasn't just another wealthy businessman. At 35, he was the mysterious billionaire CEO of Blackwood Dynamics, one of America's most powerful technology companies. Rumors surrounded him everywhere he went. People whispered that he wasn't an alpha at all, but something far rarer. An enigma. A man whose pheromones could silence an entire room without raising his voice. No one understood why a man like Damien would choose someone as ordinary as Ethan. The headlines called it America's most unbelievable love story. Ethan believed it too. For the next 3 years, Damien loved him with an intensity that sometimes felt overwhelming. Every birthday was unforgettable. Every anniversary was celebrated like a national holiday. Damien bought him a breathtaking estate hidden deep in the forests outside Aspen, Colorado, far away from cameras and reporters. He insisted Ethan never worried about money again. "If there's something you want," Damien always whispered while holding him close, "you'll never have to ask twice." At first, Ethan thought it was romantic. Looking back, he realized it was control disguised as devotion. Damien hated when Ethan went anywhere alone. He hired personal drivers, private security, and assistants Ethan had never requested. Whenever Ethan mentioned visiting old friends in Boston, Damien always found a reason to postpone the trip. "Next month," he'd say with a gentle smile. Next month never came. Still, Damien never raised his voice. He never hit him. He never gave Ethan a reason to question the marriage. Instead, he loved him so completely that Ethan slowly stopped noticing how much of his old life had quietly disappeared. The bakery was gone. His apartment was gone. Most of his friends had drifted away. Without realizing it, Damien had become Ethan's entire world. One rainy Thursday afternoon, Damien left for what was supposed to be a 2-day business meeting in Chicago. "I'll be back Friday night," he promised before kissing Ethan's forehead. "Don't stay up waiting for me." After watching his husband's black SUV disappear through the estate gates, Ethan wandered through the silent mansion, searching for an expensive fountain pen Damien had promised he could borrow for his journal. The pen wasn't in the library. It wasn't in the living room. Finally, Ethan walked into Damien's private office, a room he almost never entered. The office smelled exactly like Damien. Dark cedar, then leather. Everything inside was perfectly organized. As Ethan searched the massive mahogany desk, his fingers brushed against something unusual beneath the bottom drawer. Click. A hidden compartment slid open. His heartbeat quickened. Inside rested a small black wooden box tied with a faded silver ribbon. The moment he lifted the lid, a different scent drifted into the air. White roses. Sandalwood. Not his scent. Someone else's. Confused, Ethan reached inside and pulled out a stack of old photographs. The first picture slipped into his hand. His entire body froze. The young man smiling in the photograph looked exactly like him. The same ash-brown hair. The same freckles. The same smile. Only the eyes were different. Bright emerald green instead of hazel. Ethan turned the photo over with trembling hands. Written neatly on the back were 6 words that shattered his entire world. Adrian Cole. My first and only love. His heart stopped. Another photo. Another letter. Another memory. Every single one was addressed to Adrian. Every letter was written by Damien. and every page was filled with promises of a future that had never happened. As tears blurred his vision, dozens of memories suddenly made horrifying sense. Damien always wanted his hair cut a certain way. He insisted Ethan wear white rose cologne on every anniversary. Sometimes he stared at Ethan for several silent minutes without saying a word, almost as if he were looking through him instead of at him. Ethan's knees nearly gave out. He wasn't the love of Damien Blackwood's life. He was a man who happened to wear someone else's face. With shaking hands, Ethan clutched the letters against his chest as one terrifying thought echoed through his mind. If Damien never loved me, then who exactly has been sharing my bed for the last 3 years? Ethan couldn't breathe. The letters slipped from his trembling hands, scattering across the polished hardwood floor. 3 years. 3 years of kisses, whispered promises, anniversary dinners, and sleepless nights wrapped safely in Damien's arms. And now every memory felt poisoned. He wasn't loved. He had been chosen, not because of who he was, but because he looked like someone who no longer existed. His stomach twisted violently. He rushed into the bathroom and threw up, gripping the marble sink until his knuckles turned white. Every compliment Damien had ever given him replayed inside his head. Your hair looks perfect like this. Don't change your cologne. It suits you. Smile for me. Back then, those words had sounded romantic. Now they felt like instructions. Tears streamed down Ethan's face. I was never enough, he whispered to his own reflection. I was just convenient. For nearly an hour he sat alone on the cold bathroom floor, trying to convince himself there had to be another explanation. Maybe Damien had moved on. Maybe Adrian was simply part of his past. Then Ethan unfolded the newest letter. The ink looked fresh. If I ever find someone who carries your smile again, I swear I'll never lose him too. His entire body went numb. That wasn't grief. That was obsession. For the first time since their wedding, Ethan felt afraid of his husband. He wiped away his tears and made a decision. He couldn't stay another night. He ignored the expensive luggage Damien had bought for him. Ignored the designer clothes. Ignored the jewelry. He grabbed an old canvas duffel bag from the back of a closet and stuffed it with jeans, hoodies, a few family photographs, his passport, and the small amount of cash he had secretly kept from his bakery days. Nothing else mattered. Before leaving, he removed his platinum wedding ring. For several seconds, he stared at it resting in his palm. I really loved you, he whispered. Then he placed it on Damien's desk, directly beside Adrian's photograph. No note. No goodbye. The silence said everything. His hands shook as he called the only person he still trusted. Noah Carter, his best friend from Boston. Noah answered on the second ring. Ethan? Everything okay? No. Ethan's voice cracked. I need your help. 20 minutes later, Noah had arranged a rental car under a different name and booked Ethan a room at a small roadside motel outside Albany, New York. You can stay with me, Noah insisted. I can't. Ethan looked over his shoulder toward the mansion windows. If Damien finds you because of me, he'll never stop. Noah hesitated before speaking again. What exactly did he do? Ethan closed his eyes. I'll explain later. If I tell you now. His voice dropped to a whisper. You'll tell me to call the police. By sunset, Ethan was driving through heavy rain with nothing but windshield wipers breaking the silence. Every mile between him and the estate made breathing a little easier. By midnight, he checked into the motel using a fake name. The room was tiny. Peeling wallpaper. A buzzing neon sign outside the window. A bed that squeaked whenever he sat down. It was nothing like the luxury he'd left behind. For the first time in years, it felt like freedom. He booked the earliest flight to London, planning to disappear before sunrise. No more billionaire husband. No more mansion. No more lies. At exactly 2:47 a.m., Ethan allowed himself to believe he'd escaped. Then, every light in the room flickered. The air suddenly felt impossibly heavy. His chest tightened as though invisible hands were squeezing the oxygen from his lungs. A familiar scent drifted through the room. Then, dark cedar. His blood turned to ice. No. He backed away from the door. No. No, that's impossible. The scent grew stronger. Closer. His heart pounded so violently he could hear it. Then, boom! The motel door exploded inward, crashing onto the floor in a shower of splintered wood. Standing in the doorway was Damien Blackwood. His tailored suit was soaked from the storm. Rain dripped from his dark hair. But it wasn't his appearance that terrified Ethan. It was his eyes. They no longer looked warm. They were completely black, cold, empty, predatory. Damien stepped into the room without saying a word. The air itself seemed to belong to him. Ethan's legs refused to move. Terror rooted him to the floor. Finally, Damien spoke in a calm voice that somehow sounded more frightening than a scream. "You really believed?" He took one slow step closer. "That you could disappear from me?" Damien crossed the room with terrifying calm, as if Ethan's desperate escape had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Ethan stumbled backward until his shoulders slammed against the wall. "Don't come any closer." His voice shook despite every effort to sound brave. "I know everything." Damien stopped only a few feet away. The rain behind him poured through the shattered doorway, soaking the motel carpet, but he didn't seem to notice. "What exactly do you think you know?" he asked quietly. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "I found Adrian's letters." Silence. "I saw the pictures." Still nothing. "You married me because I look like him." Damien lowered his head for a moment before letting out a slow breath. "When did you find them?" "This afternoon. And instead of asking me, you lied to me." Ethan's voice echoed through the tiny motel room. "For 3 years. I wasn't lying. You built an entire marriage on another man's memory." Damien finally looked up. His expression wasn't guilty. It was disappointed. "Adrian died 8 years ago. I don't care. I watched him die in my arms. I said I don't care." Tears streamed freely down Ethan's face. "I am not Adrian. I'm not his replacement. I'm not his second chance." For the first time since arriving, something dangerous flashed across Damien's face. He took another step forward. "You've misunderstood everything." "No." Ethan shook his head. "I finally understand. You don't love me. You love the ghost you keep seeing every time you look at me." For several long seconds, Damien said absolutely nothing. Then he smiled. It wasn't warm. It wasn't comforting. It was the smile of a man who had already decided the conversation was over. "I'll admit something," Damien said softly. "The first time I saw you, your resemblance to Adrian stopped me in my tracks." Ethan closed his eyes. "I knew it. But that's not why I kept you." Ethan laughed bitterly. "You expect me to believe that?" "No." Damien's voice became colder. "I expect you to listen." He stepped closer until only inches separated them. "I buried Adrian. I mourned him. I spent years wishing I could save him." His eyes locked onto Ethan's. "But the man standing in front of me," he gently touched Ethan's cheek, "is not Adrian." Ethan slapped his hand away. "Then let me leave." Damien's expression hardened instantly. "No. You don't own me." "Ido." The words came without hesitation, without shame. "As long as you're my husband. I want a divorce." "No." "I'll disappear." "No." "I'll tell the police." Damien actually laughed. "The police?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out Ethan's passport. Ethan's heart stopped. "Looking for this?" His blood ran cold. "How? You searched my luggage?" Damien didn't answer. Instead, he tossed the passport onto the motel bed. "You've underestimated how carefully I protect what's mine." Before Ethan could react, Damien grabbed his wrist. His grip wasn't painful. It was impossible to escape. Ethan fought with everything he had. He kicked. He shoved. He even tried to bite Damien's shoulder. Nothing worked. Damien lifted him effortlessly and carried him outside through the pouring rain. Several black SUVs waited with their engines running. Security guards stood beside them without speaking. None of them looked surprised, as if this had all been expected. "No!" Ethan screamed. "Please, somebody help me." The motel manager peeked through the office window. One glance at Damien's security team, and he quietly closed the blinds. The convoy disappeared into the storm. An hour later, they arrived back at the Blackwood estate. This time Damien didn't carry Ethan to the beautiful bedroom they had once shared. He walked deep into the oldest wing of the mansion, a bedroom Ethan had never been allowed to enter. The room felt more like a fortress than a home. Heavy oak doors, steel locks, thick stone walls. Before Ethan could run, cold metal snapped around both wrists. Click, click. He stared in horror. Silver restraints, attached to a heavy chain fixed to the massive bed. Damien! His voice broke. Please don't do this. Damien ignored him. He removed his soaked jacket and calmly rolled up his sleeves. I trusted you. I never stopped loving you. And you tried to disappear. I was scared. I know. You gave me no choice. No. Damien looked directly into his eyes. You made a choice. You chose to run. The room fell silent. Hours passed. Ethan eventually drifted into an exhausted sleep. When he woke the next morning, Damien wasn't in the room. The chain still held him in place. Across the bedroom, Damien's office door stood slightly open. A laptop rested on the desk. The screen was still glowing. Carefully stretching the chain as far as it would reach, Ethan caught the reflection in a nearby mirror. A presentation filled the screen. Project Phoenix. His stomach tightened. Under the title were dozens of confidential files, corporate acquisitions, medical reports, financial records. Then he saw something that stole the air from his lungs. Hudson Street Bakery. His bakery. His family's bakery. Hands trembling, Ethan read every line he could make out from the reflection. Blackwood Holdings had secretly purchased the building 3 years earlier. Rent had been deliberately increased. Suppliers had been bought out. Loans had been blocked. Every financial disaster that destroyed Ethan's business had been carefully engineered. No. His voice cracked. No. The file continued. Subject selected, Ethan Brooks. Reason, physical resemblance to Adrian Cole. Genetic compatibility, exceptionally high. Another page appeared. Medical scans, DNA reports, psychological evaluations, years of surveillance, photos of Ethan leaving work, shopping, walking home, drinking coffee, long before Damien had ever introduced himself. The truth crashed into him all at once. Their first meeting at the coffee shop hadn't been fate. Their romance hadn't been destiny. Even the collapse of his bakery had been planned. Damien hadn't rescued him. He had created the disaster, then stepped in pretending to be the hero. At that exact moment, a voice echoed behind him. I wondered how long it would take you to discover the rest. Ethan turned slowly. Damien stood in the doorway. No anger. No panic. Only quiet acceptance. You destroyed my life. I removed every obstacle between us. My bakery was my family's dream. It was keeping you away from me. You ruined everything. I built something better. Ethan stared at the man he had once called his soulmate. I wasn't your husband. His voice barely rose above a whisper. I was your project. Damien didn't deny it. Instead, he took one slow step forward and said the words Ethan would never forget. You were never my project, Ethan. You were the future I decided I would never lose again. The days that followed blurred together into a strange mixture of luxury and imprisonment. Ethan never left the room. The chains were gone after a week, but they were replaced by something even harder to escape. Every door required Damien's fingerprint. Private security guarded every hallway. The estate sat on hundreds of acres surrounded by dense pine forests, surveillance cameras, and high-security fences. There was nowhere to run. Damien acted as though nothing had changed. Every morning he brought Ethan breakfast himself. Every evening they ate dinner together beside the fireplace. He bought Ethan new books. Fresh flowers appeared beside the bed every day. He even hired a famous pastry chef to rebuild Ethan's dream bakery inside the estate. You said you missed baking, Damien said one afternoon. So I built you your own kitchen. Ethan stared silently at the beautiful room. Professional ovens. Imported marble counters. Every tool he had ever dreamed of owning. It was perfect, and it felt like another prison. You can't replace my life with expensive gifts. I'm not trying to replace it. Damien smiled softly. I'm protecting it. Weeks later, Ethan noticed something strange. Whenever Damien left for business meetings in New York City, an unbearable anxiety settled over him. His hands trembled. His breathing became shallow. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't eat. The moment Damien returned home, The panic disappeared. Ethan hated himself for it. His mind still wanted freedom. His body no longer agreed. One afternoon, Damien announced that someone would be visiting. A middle-aged physician walked into the room carrying a leather medical case. "My name is Dr. Samuel Hayes." He smiled politely. "I'm just here for a routine examination." Hope exploded inside Ethan's chest. Finally, someone from outside as Damien stepped away to answer a phone call. Ethan grabbed the doctor's arm. "Please." His voice cracked. "You have to help me. I'm being held here against my will. Call the FBI. Call anyone. My friend Noah Carter can. Prove who I am." Dr. Hayes looked into Ethan's terrified eyes. For one heartbreaking second, Ethan believed he had found an ally. Then the doctor gently removed Ethan's hand. "I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwood." He spoke quietly while checking Ethan's pulse. "Your stress levels are still elevated." Ethan's hope shattered. The doctor wasn't there to rescue him. He worked for Damien. When the examination ended, Dr. Hayes turned toward Damien. "Everything looks excellent." He closed the medical file. "The neurological bond has stabilized exactly as expected." Damien nodded. "And the compatibility is extraordinary." The doctor smiled. "There's no reason to delay your long-term family plans." Family. The word echoed through Ethan's mind. The room suddenly felt colder. After the doctor left, Ethan stared at Damien in disbelief. "You planned this too?" Damien didn't deny it. "I plan everything that concerns our future." "My future?" Ethan laughed bitterly. "You stole my future. I gave you one. You destroyed my bakery. I built you a better one. You destroyed my freedom. I removed your suffering. You destroyed my identity." Damien walked closer until only inches separated them. "I gave you a home. You gave me a cage." For the first time, Damien looked genuinely hurt. "I have spent years making sure no one could ever take you away from me. I wasn't yours to keep. You became mine the day I chose you."
No.
Ethan's voice remained steady. "I became your victim." Silence filled the room. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Damien slowly reached into his jacket pocket and placed a small velvet box on the table. Inside was Ethan's wedding ring. "I kept it. I knew you'd wear it again someday." Ethan looked at the ring but never reached for it. "I'll never belong to you." Damien's expression softened. "I know you believe that." He picked up the ring himself. Then, without asking permission, he gently slid it back onto Ethan's finger. "This isn't about ownership. It's about forever." Ethan looked into the eyes of the man he had once loved more than anyone in the world. For the first time, he finally understood the terrifying truth. Damien's love had always been real, but it wasn't healthy. It wasn't selfless. It wasn't freedom. It was obsession disguised as devotion. A love that protected by controlling. A love that gave everything, except the right to leave. Outside, the snow began falling across the Colorado mountains, covering the Blackwood estate in peaceful white silence. To the rest of the world, it looked like a billionaire's private paradise. Inside those walls, it was a beautiful prison. Ethan stood beside the window, watching the snow drift across the frozen trees. Somewhere beyond those mountains, people laughed with friends, walked wherever they wanted, and loved without fear. That life no longer belonged to him. He wasn't the young baker from Boston anymore. He wasn't even the man who had once believed fairy tales. He was the husband of Damien Blackwood, a man adored beyond measure, protected beyond reason, and trapped by a love so possessive that it would never let him go. If Ethan were your friend, what would you have told him to do? Run before opening that box or stay and fight for the truth? And here's the bigger question. Do you believe Damien truly loved Ethan? Or was it nothing more than a dangerous obsession? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and your opinion might be featured in the next story discussion. If you enjoyed this dark romance filled with shocking twists, betrayal, and unforgettable love, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next emotional BL story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next hidden love story.